First of all, let us go back to 1977. That is actually when the Foreign Trade Association was founded here in Brussels, so 36 years ago. And that is, as you know, the overarching association where BSCI belongs to. And the goal of this association was, in first place, not social compliance or improving the supply chain, but making imports easier, facilitate imports of consumer goods, and therefore support retailers and importers in providing consumers with a diversity of goods and good quality and at reasonable prices. That was the goal of the FTA from the very beginning, and still is the goal. With globalization, retailers and importers more and more source consumer goods from all corners of the world, particularly developing and newly industrialized countries. Because of this, companies face many challenges with regard to working conditions across their supply chain. In 2003, so 26 years after the foundation of FTA, the association launched the Business Social Compliance Initiative. And like many initiatives, at the beginning there was a lot of ambition, but few resources. To be frank, there were no resources. So BSCI started with less than 20 companies. In the beginning Germans, and very quickly Dutch companies joined, then followed by Swedish, Danish, Austrian and Swiss companies. It is interesting to see how the sourcing countries of the BSCI participating companies have evolved. In the beginning it was India. That is also where we had the first pilot activities, where we had the first workshops. So India was in the focus. But now we see that China accounts for around 69% of BSCI's overall audits, and of course also other activities. It's not only the audits. Bangladesh accounts for 8%, while India accounts for just 7%. That can, of course, also change. Since the beginning, our aim has been to support producers towards continuous improvement, development approach. That was the catchword. So not test, have an audit, and then pass or fail, but really try to develop a good relationship with this long-standing relationship with the supplier and support him in improving. And BSCI developed auditing tools and also rolled out, for this reason, training programs to promote best practices, and also engaged in dialogue with local governments, trade unions and NGOs, and of course also with producer associations in supplier countries. In 2005, BSCI held its very first annual conference. This was the first time when all members also gathered together, many less than today. It's interesting to note that at that time almost no companies had a CSR manager, but also I have to say also in the suppliers, on the supplier side, there was also not much awareness, not much capacity, very often no interlocutors. And at that time also we still had quite some discussions with governments who resisted and didn't want that we carry out these activities. I remember discussions in India and also in Morocco. China was also not, I think, so happy at the beginning that what we were doing there. During the first years, BSCI had focused on improving working conditions in industrial supply chains, but in 2007 we decided to broaden the focus to cover working conditions also at farm level and develop a system to improve working conditions for food and primary production. And BSCI was now open to companies sourcing from all sectors and all countries. To be transparent in our activity, we have released then in 2006 the first annual report, and since then every year. We have always been convinced that the complex labor issues across supply chains are best tackled through a collaborative approach, So in November 2007, we created the Stakeholder Council as a platform of constructive dialogue on working conditions, so the Stakeholder Council here. And we are fortunate that still we have some of our original stakeholders on board. With the increasing interest among stakeholders and the media, BSCI companies started to require more support at the national level. And through this, the first national contact group was initiated, and that was in Switzerland in 2008. Then Denmark, Finland, Germany, Sweden, Netherlands followed, and very recently this year, a national contact group also in France. By 2008, BSCI had reached 100 participating companies, including a staggering number of small and medium enterprises. And in 2008, we started to systemize our cooperation with stakeholders in producer countries, held regular roundtables in all important sourcing countries for BSCI companies, including China, Bangladesh, India, Turkey, Morocco, and Vietnam, and also stakeholder discussions and meetings in quite a few other countries. The increasing number of participants of BSCI meant that the number of producers was growing exponentially, which called for increased activities in sourcing countries. BSCI's capacity building activities grew from just a few workshops per year to more than 50 in 2009. I think meanwhile we have more than 100. And particularly important is, I think, to mention that the quality has improved. We started out with awareness-raising workshops. Then we went into many more specific training activities, and I think that is important to bring us, and in particular the producers, forward. With all the activities taking place in sourcing countries, it was time for BSCI also to have increased presence in these countries. Starting with its most important in 2009, China, then India, represented by Dr. Kepshul, and Bangladesh in 2007, represented by Christian von Mitzlaff. A significant milestone in 2011 was the integration of the governance of the Foreign Trade Association and the BSCI, and I think that has also played an important role in the development and the further development of the Foreign Trade Association and also the BSCI. BSCI's growth reached a new milestone earlier this year as we reached 1,000 participants. As we gather hundreds of SMEs and dozens of multinationals now, BSCI represents the largest initiative of companies working together towards improved working conditions in factories and farms worldwide. And finally, we are here today celebrating our 10-year anniversary. In the past 10 years, we have achieved a lot thanks to your efforts. We represent 1,115 committed companies. We have reached out to nearly 1,500 attendees of producer workshops over the last 5 years. We are represented in China, and India, and Bangladesh, as I said already. And most importantly, we have a strong system to improve working conditions in the supply chain. Of course, I think we have had a good start to say where do we stand. We are not standing at the beginning. We had a quite good start, but I think still also a long way to go. And but I think it's also a promising way, particularly again if you see the developments in Bangladesh. I think there you can also see how you have to work with local authorities, with associations in the country, with the trade unions in the country, to really move something, to really induce change and improvement and a change of minds. Thank you very much for your attention.